Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to Is This How We Conversation. Thank you for being patient. We're starting a little late. We have our new 9 o'clock service, so we're still figuring a few things out.
Kids' rooms open today.
We really gracious energy towards us. I'm Megan, and this is Kylie. And today we are going to play a game about guessing which of these TV shows has not been a true TV show.
So if you're familiar with Truth TV at all, like really nothing's on there except reruns of Impractical Jokers, which is so worth the watch if you've ever seen it. It's hilarious. I highly recommend it. And then apparently it's like a tryout channel for a bunch of different
I always
shows.
thought True TV was like a crime channel.
I know. It like True TV sounds like it would be like nonfiction, but that's not the truth.
It's like a try. I didn't know that.
I don't even know if I'm like necessarily explaining it right, but like you wouldn't really watch anything from there unless it like got moved somewhere else. So anyways, it's kind of like the Hallmark channel where like there are all of these ridiculous scenarios for movies that are happening.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna list 4 different shows, names of shows, and one of them is not an actual true TV show.
Right.
So
we're gonna try and guess along with you.
Along with us, which one is not the actual show.
Right.
So, this is called, so the first one is Minecraft Country, Bear Swamp Recovery, Turdy Works, like a turd, or Southern Fried Stings. If Brent made these up, I'm going with Turdy Works is the fake one.
I'm gonna, oh man. Southern Fried Stings, Turdy Works, Bear Swamp Recovery, Minecraft Country. I was gonna say Minecraft Country, that probably is something though. You would, I mean, it's such a prevalent game right now.
Yeah, I don't, well, Minecraft
Turdy Works.
Minecraft
it is spelled with an I.
Yeah.
That feels.
Yeah, it's spelled with an I.
let's say Turdy Works, don't you think?
Kylie and I guess Turdy Works. Is it, I don't know, have we lost people? Our normal chat people are not in the chat today.
Turdy Works. Okay, Gary.
Oh, it just went up on the thing, so let's see if someone responds.
Oh, got it.
We think it is
We're
Turdy
guessing
Works.
Turdy Works.
Particularly because it's spelled incorrectly. So we'll see if, the Plemons say Minecraft County. Or country.
Oh, yeah.
They think that's fake.
That was my second guess.
I'm still sticking with
But
Turdy Works.
maybe it's like a reality show. I'm not sure.
See, I think there could be a reality show about Minecraft.
Right. Because it's literally, I mean, my son is, he just turned 8. He's obsessed
Jerry
with it.
thinks it's Turdy Works also.
It's my dad.
Yeah. All right. Okay, our guess is Turdy Works, Gary. Which one's the right one? Minecraft Country? Dang it.
I should have gone with my gut.
You should have gone with the Plemons. They knew.
They knew.
Do you guys watch True TV, Plemons?
Oh, country. They fixed it.
Yeah, they fixed it.
Well, Minecraft County is
Works
just
too.
as it works. Okay, the next set of 4. You guys ready? South Beach Tow, as in like TOW.
Like a tow truck.
It only hurts when I laugh. Dunk this and Barmageddon.
Is it Barmageddon or Barmageddon? Like a bar or a barn?
Like a
bar. I bet it's a bar.
Barmageddon. Yeah, I bet it's a bar.
Barmageddon.
So.
They don't watch True TV. It was just a guess. Just a good guess.
Just a guess. I'm gonna guess South Beach Tow. Which is probably like tow truck. I bet that's tow truck drivers driving around South Beach.
That sounds entertaining.
It only hurts when I laugh. I bet that's some sort of like weird injury that you haven't heard of before.
I want to say it only hurts when I laugh is my guess.
I'm gonna say dunk this.
Okay.
What do you guys guess? Clemens. Darren. George is on here again. Good morning, George. Okay, so you said...
I said it only hurts when I laugh, is my guess.
And I said dunk this. Okay.
We'll see if we get one or
Any
two.
other guesses?
Jerry said Barmageddon.
Barmageddon for the fake one.
Yep.
It is a clever name. But...
Oh, the Plemons say Barmageddon too. Dang it. I'm still sticking with it only hurts when I laugh.
And I'm doing dunk this, which doesn't
Gary,
even feel...
What's the answer?
Dunk this.
Yes! yes. Which is like the least weird name out of all of them. Okay. So.
All right. Thanks, George. We think we look nice too.
Yep. Oh.
All right. We have Branson Famous, Disorder in the Court, Fake Off, So You Think You Can Throw an Axe.
Ooh.
I'm going to say Fake Off.
I have a feeling we may have been dropped from the live. Are we dropped from the live, Gary, or are we still on
No, we're
there?
still live.
Oh, okay.
No, maybe not.
Okay.
I have no idea what's going on. We're just going to keep talking until someone tells us to stop.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do.
Branson Famous, Disorder the Court. Okay, Branson is like in Missouri.
Yeah. And it's like
a little
it's like a musical
Vegas.
theater place. Yeah.
Branson Famous,
Missouri.
Disorder in the Court, Fake Off, So You Think You Can Throw an Axe. I bet it's So You Think You Can Throw an Axe.
No, because that's like a play off of So You Think You Can Dance.
Right, 3 minutes? Okay.
I think it's Fake Off.
Okay, so Darren says it only hurts when I laugh.
That was for the other one.
Okay.
But I think you might be right. Something happened with I don't know what's going on.
So You Think You Can Throw an Axe.
All right, Gary, what is the answer to number 3?
So You Think You Can Throw an Axe.
Yes!
you
I got
got
that.
it.
No,
Wait,
no,
I
you
said
got that.
yeah, so you
JK.
think you can throw an axe?
I said Fake Off. Sorry.
No,
Trying to take
it's
your
good.
credit.
It's good. I like it.
I really think something happened to our live stream.
Okay.
All right, one more?
One more.
All right, here we go.
Famous. So You Think You Can Throw an Axe? Yes, Clemens Family. You got it. You got
Yes.
it.
I did not. All right,
Okay.
last one. Right, Gary?
Yeah,
Last
last one.
one. All right, Hardcore Pawn.
Hardcore Pawn.
That's an actual show, isn't it?
Probably.
Makeshift Hospitals. Oh, Kentucky Bitters. Is that like the Storage Wars kind of a thing?
Probably, but in Kentucky.
And then 6 Degrees of Everything.
I'm going to say makeshift hospitals.
Me too.
That sounds awful.
That sounds
But
like a
you know
horrible.
what? I've been to countries where they have literally
Well, my
makeshift
dad
hospitals.
in the Navy, because they used to do like MASH, right? Like a mobile hospital. Those are makeshift hospitals.
Yeah. Which would be an interesting watch. I
Yeah.
actually feel like, I hope that is a show, because I
Yeah.
feel like I would...
We're
Jump in
saying
on
makeshift hospitals. What does everybody else think? I think my chat isn't updating very well. That's really what I think.
Let's see.
All right, let's give it 30 more seconds and then we will see what the answer is.
Makeshift hospitals is my guess, but
Makeshift
I really do hope it's a show.
Jerry says 6 Degrees of Everything.
6 degrees of everything.
Yep. All right, Gary. What is it? Makeshift hospital? Yes.
Oh, but I wish it was a show. I feel like I won,
Wait,
but I also
don't
feel
leave
like
me
I
hanging.
lost. Oh, sorry. I thought it was a yeah sort of excitement.
All right, is that all? One more? One more. Okay.
Okay.
Last one. Just kidding on the last time I said last one. All right, Those Who Can't, Lizard Lick Towing, Full Throttle Salon. Oh my gosh, do you think that's a
Full
saloon?
Throttle Saloon?
Oh, sorry.
But that would be hilarious.
Is that like a saloon that's in like a car or something, or a boat
Full
or something?
Throttle Saloon.
And then $1 Million Prenups. That's 100% a show. I'm gonna say Lizard Lick Towing.
Lizard Lick Towing. I'm gonna say Those Who Can't. It seems like such a normal name for all
I know,
of these weird ones.
But I feel like that would actually be an entertaining
who
show
can't.
to watch people who cannot do things.
That's true. That's true. I'm going to stick with it, though. Those who can't.
All right, and I'm going with Lizard Lick Towing. Although that does sound like the name of a tow company somewhere in the world. Probably
For
Florida.
sure. Lizard Lick?
Lizard Lick
Or like
Towing.
New Mexico?
Or maybe like Hawaii.
Yes. With all the
What does everybody else think? I need to give you guys a little more time. All right. And then this is our last one for sure.
$1 million prenups,
They think $1 million
says the
prenups
Clemens
is
family.
the guess. I don't know. I think that's an actual show though. I feel like I've seen that show.
Yeah.
Not watched it, but like seen commercials for it.
$1 million prenups. Maybe. I guess I don't see commercials
I
very
think
often.
we're ready. All right, what's the answer, Gary? Plemons are so
Lemons
good at
are,
this
I
game.
think they got all of them right. The Plemons, Anna. She is a smart lady.
Or is
All
it
right.
Jason?
You guys, it could be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Sorry for the tardiness. We're figuring things out. Thank you for being gracious and
Love having
participating.
you on here each week.
We
and
still love our online audience, and we will still be doing this for as long as it works and as long as you guys are participating. So keep participating. We love having you. And enjoy. Brent is finishing up our Exodus series today.
Yes.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Welcome to Eastlake, everybody. My name is London, and when I'm not making these super cool videos, I'm volunteering in the early childhood area, which opened today for those who didn't know. For the parents sitting in the auditorium this morning, I know it probably feels a little like heaven to be in a room with other adults and no kids. We promise your kids are having fun and being safe without you, but you need to pick them up after service. Feel free to saunter on the way. Thanks for checking out this evolving and very unique way of doing church. We appreciate you making church a part of your weekend, whether you're watching from home or sitting in our hard plastic chairs in the auditorium. If you're new to Eastlake, you picked a great day to come and check us out. Just to give you a quick glimpse of what we care about most, we're trying to be the best church option for people who aren't typically into church. We don't care what you look like, who you vote for, or whether or not your Christmas lights are still in your house. If you are new, we'd love for you to let us know by filling out the Connect card in our super trendy app. For every first-time guest in the month of March, we're going to be donating $20 to Grace Clinic, a local nonprofit that provides medical care and service for the uninsured and underinsured in our community. Let us know you're here so we know how many zeros to put at the end of that check. Next week is Easter, which is typically our biggest week of the year. We are going to be hosting 2 services, similar to this week, one at 9 a.m. with no kids areas and one at 10 a.m. with kids areas. Space is limited due to social distancing restrictions, so RSVP through our app or via Connect card so we know that you're coming. Or watch our live stream on our app and you don't even have to get dressed up. Or you can get dressed up just to impress your neighbors. Thanks for coming to part 3 of our series, Exodus, a series on making sense of Easter. But before we start, here's the best thing we found on the internet this week.
Here we go.
Oh! Great job!
Well, I made it.
Don't be late, don't be late to me. Don't be late to me, love.
Well, good morning. I forgot to put this on my ear. It's kind of important. Great to see you this morning. Thanks for being here. We're so glad that you're here. Watching this online, for those of you who are watching online, we're pumped that you would watch this to take time out of your Sunday or perhaps watching this on replay. We are excited to be back it looks a little different here at Eastlake today. We got a little bit of a crowd and we've got some kids areas that are open. We're super excited about that. And it's fun. So if you brought your kids or you're back with your kids, we're super excited. I'm excited to be back. I took a week off last week and had a chance to go on an annual trip, an annual pilgrimage to Las Vegas with my couple of college buddies, and we watch a bunch of college basketball and bet on a bunch of college basketball and have a great time with that. And I watched from my hotel room via the app. I watched Lauren speak last week, and it was by far the most profitable hour of the few days that I was there. And by profitable, I mean both in terms of content and application to my life, but also I didn't lose money during that time for that whole hour, and that was really, really nice. So it's good. Thank you, Lauren, for continuing our series. We're on part 3 of a 4-part series. We're going to conclude it next week on Easter Sunday. But it's a series called Exodus, Making Sense of Easter. And the idea being that the early church tried to make sense of what the Easter story kind of talked about. And when they did so, they viewed it very much through the lens of what took place in Exodus. There's a story in the book of Exodus, an entire book dedicated to it, about an Exodus out of Egypt, a God who came through on his promises to have a specific people group show up and come out of slavery in Egypt and into a promised land. And when the early church tried to reflect on what do we know about Jesus' death, they used that story as like a paradigm to kind of shape this sort of thing. In the same way that if you've ever done a puzzle and you throw the pieces out on the table and then you set the box in the corner and you're like, all right, I'm going to look at that picture as I do this, and that's going to help make sense of what I've got going on here and why I have a blue piece and a green piece and a yellow piece and whatever, and I'm trying to kind of piece the puzzle together. And the picture doesn't always line up exactly, and we'll talk about how that this is a little bit different than an Exodus thing, but for them, they said, and as we're trying to make sense of Jesus' death and resurrection, they asked the same question that a lot of us ask. Next week, we're going to show up and we're going to celebrate on Easter the death of a person who died 2,000 years ago. And what does that have to do with me for anything? Like, what does that mean for me? That's a long time ago. I'm not Jewish. These stories sound almost fictional for some of you. Maybe reading this or whatever, or talking through some of this, and it's a difficult thing. And so it's a critical piece. And it's interesting because I've said this before, the gospel stories are 4 different accounts, basically memoirs in the same way that we think about it, memoirs of the life and the teaching of Jesus, written from people who are trying to make sense of the Jesus story. And they're written 30, 40, 50 years after the fact, because probably for many of them, they remember Jesus saying, I'm going away and I'm preparing a place, I'm going to come back and get you. And they probably thought that meant like next Thursday, right? And so if you know you're going somewhere next Thursday, why would I write a story about this? And then next Thursday comes and goes, and then it gets pushed back a year and a month and whatever. And all of a sudden you realize this might not be on the timeline that I thought. And so I probably need to write some of these things down before I die. I don't want to let this story die. Or there's a lot of disinformation out there, and I want to give my side of the story. Because I talked to Peter. Mark says, I talked to Peter, and Peter told me this version about what Jesus says. Or Luke says, I did research. I'm a doctor. I like this kind of stuff. I researched and wanted to provide an orderly account of what Jesus' story looked like. Or John would say, let me write my version of the story. And he writes his last, saying, I was one of his inner disciples. In fact, he had a group of disciples, and then he had 12, and then inside that 12, he even had 3, and I was one of those 3, and I saw and had some conversations with Jesus that nobody else had. So let me give you my version of the story. And in all 4 gospel accounts, there's a slowing down during the last week of Jesus' life. From the moment he enters into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, which is what we celebrate today, through the Last Supper and the Passover meal that they shared together, his death and his burial and his resurrection. This is a busy, busy week in the life of the church, and it's one of the slowest parts of the stories when you read through kind of all 4 gospel accounts. Early on, they'll be like, Jesus went here, and he did this, and he healed this, and he said this, and he taught this. And then right here, it slows down. It's like 3 or 4 chapters for like 1 week of his life. It's kind of like when you're doing a drive, everybody in traffic slows down when there's an accident on the side of the road, because you're like, what's everybody doing? Well, everybody's kind of goosenecking, looking at what happened and what's going on with this. That's what's taking place in these gospel narratives. And they tried to make sense, or their ability to kind of write this out is them going, here's what we think happened, or here's what we think is important in relation to his death and what it means for us. That's the idea behind this series and what we're going with, and we're realizing that in your Bible, there's basically 2 major sections, an Old Testament and New Testament, and inside of each of those different 2 testaments is what's called a master narrative or a master story. And a master story is essentially this: of all of the possible ways of linking together and accounting for the events that make up our experience, which one offers us the fullest description and the most adequate explanation of and for our lives? which version of the story, and this is true when it comes to your decision on who you vote for and how you vote in politics. This is in terms of how you choose your potential mate someday. This is how you choose who you're going to vote for college basketball. This is going to be, there's so many things about this just feels like it makes the most sense. It has the best explanatory value for me about who I am and what I exist for. So for a lot of Jewish people, in their Old Testament scripture, they wouldn't call it the Old Testament, they would call it the Tanakh or the Hebrew scriptures. They would say the master story for us is this idea of an exodus out of Egypt and into a promised land, that we feel like we've been chosen uniquely in this way. And then in the New Testament, the master narrative changes. It's related to that. It looks like that, but it's a little bit different. This master narrative in the New Testament is there's a guy who came, and his name is Jesus, and he taught a certain way of doing things. And his teaching is validated by his death, and his death is some sort of a preservation of sin or preservation of death for us. His death means something for us in the same way that the lamb's death and the blood on the window for the Passover thing meant something for them. This is what it means for us. There's two distinct master narrative stories at play in here, and they inform each other, and they look quite a bit alike in certain places, as we'll see today, but there is a few differences at the very end that I think are interesting to talk about. So that's the point of the series. That's why we're here, and that's what we're studying. So in every good story, there's always a good protagonist. Every good story has a good protagonist. A protagonist is the one that you root for. It's the character in the story that it doesn't take you long to realize the author is trying to get you to like this person. It's the one where, even though I don't have a dog in the fight, I kind of lean towards this and I like this person. So in the story of, like Harry Potter, the story of his parents make you really like Harry Potter at first, being like, oh, I feel bad he lost his parents, right? Frodo Baggins is like this innocent weirdo, whatever. I like him. He's got a ring. He's kind of, frumpy. He's got big feet and, he's tiny. I can identify with that. I'm in that way. Let's do it. We look at Baby Yoda. He's got the eyes, right? There's something about, and the show isn't even named Baby Yoda, and his name's not even Baby Yoda. It was just like he's the protagonist of the story. He's the one we care about, right? In the Jesus story, we are taught early on that Mary and Joseph take their son to Jerusalem to do the annual pilgrimage and to dedicate the child and all these types of things, and they end up leaving him behind. And they find him, it says days later. They were traveling with family and they thought that other people had him. And then they find out, gosh, we just left our kid in the big city. So they go back into the big city and they find him, and he's entertaining all of these religious elite people, and they're like, this kid is different. There's something is unique about this kid. And it's the author's way of going, this is going to be a story about him. You're going to like this person. He is the protagonist in this story. This is a big deal in this way. And so we find then, we know the protagonist in the New Testament, the New Covenant story. We're going to spend a little bit of time comparing this with the protagonist in the Old Testament version of this, in the master narrative for the Israelite people through the person of Moses. A name that we've heard before, we're probably familiar with his story even as we go through. We're going to talk about the beginning part of his story, where he came from, and see how the early church was going. I see Jesus in this, or I see Moses and Jesus, is probably what they would begin to say. So Exodus chapter 2, if you have your Bible with you, or if you want to follow along, we're going to fly through a bunch of verses. They're going to be on the note sheet, so if you're watching this online, you can scroll to the bottom and see through all of this, or I'll try and talk through them as clearly as possible. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, right? Jacob had 12 sons. Each of the 12 sons serves as a tribe. And so this is one of the sons and one of their ancestors. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Now, there's some backstory here that if you grew up in church, you know this story, but essentially the Israelites, were started with Abraham. It was just one guy called by God, and then all of a sudden you're going to have all these kind of descendants, and it's going to be as numerous as the stars in the sky. By the time of his death, he has one son. His name is Isaac, and that's not nearly that's like a cloudy night. I can see one star, right? So that's not that great of a follow through. But he's got one son, and then Isaac has a son named Jacob, and then Jacob has 12. In the midst of having those 12, one of them is his favorite. There's backstory for that. The other brothers don't like that dad has favorites. They sell him into slavery. He makes his way to Egypt, becomes interpreter of dreams, gets a job working for the king of that era, or the pharaoh of that era. And then it says that there's a great famine in the land. And because of Joseph's wisdom, Egypt is well prepared for it. Meanwhile, the outside countries are not. The brothers are then forced to come, basically begging on their knees for food in order to survive. And lo and behold, it's their brother who they sold to slavery who's now in charge. There's a great drama. It'd make a really good miniseries on HBO. But anyways, it happens. They find themselves in Egypt. They begin to, though, the story goes that Joseph dies, the Pharaoh who knew Joseph dies, and they fall out of favor. And yet this people group, this ethnically different racial group, begins to kind of grow at a greater rate than perhaps the natives of that area. And so there becomes this animosity between us and them. We don't like them. They look different than us. They talk different than us. They have different traditions than us. They dress differently. And they're succeeding and we're not. And whenever that takes place within these two very visible things, a lot of time oppression ensues, and it does in this area. And so the solution to the population of this time is very ruthless. The Pharaoh decides that we're going to kill any Hebrew-born sons. We'll leave the girls fine, but in order to control population, we've done the math. You need one of each, and so let's kill the boys, and then we'll be able to kind of set ourselves up for success or stay in control and whatever. So this mom has this son. She sees that he's fine and realizes I have to hide him for the next 3 months. Now, it's interesting because this story for the Hebrew people is a kind of a critical story. This is them kind of overcoming both slavery and this raw deal. In the New Testament, when Jesus is born, when Matthew writes about the birth story of Jesus, which only Matthew and Luke write about a birth version of Jesus, Mark and John don't seem to be interested in where he came from in the early years. But when Matthew begins to write it, he writes about a similar sort of thing. Instead of a Pharaoh this time, it's King Herod. But he's still going after the boys. He has this edict in the land of, we're going to kill all the Jewish boys at 2 and under because I'm afraid of, again, he's a threat to authority. He's a threat to the establishment. Moses was seen as a threat to the establishment, not individually, but his people group, his personhood or whatever. And in the same way, Matthew writes Jesus in as being a threat to the establishment. King Herod doesn't want anybody to usurp his power, so we're going to kill all the babies at this point too. Immediately, what we see is the New Testament gospel writers trying to liken Jesus to this Moses. Moses had to overcome this genocidal hit on him, right? This take that was going to be out there. Jesus had to do something similar. This is just like a small piece, but to try and identify that people in power in whatever were nervous because of a threat to the establishment, and they tried to do whatever they could to kind of stop that, and there's an overcoming of this taking place. But this is verse 3. But when she could not hide him any longer, she got a papyrus basket for him, coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. In her attempt to save her child's life, where does she put him but in what seems to be the most life-threatening place of all? Listen, you would never, because you're humane, put your 3-week-old or 3-month-old in a basket even on the Columbia River. And there are no 20-foot crocodiles in the Columbia River. I've checked. You know what I mean? And yet in the Nile River, this was a very, very dangerous spot. If you and I today went on a canoe ride and tipped over in the Nile, I'm not worried about drowning. I'm worried about getting eaten. That's the difference, or catching something, right? So there's massive dangers involved in this, and she took a valuation of that feels like a safer space than me hanging on to my child, which is crazy. And for them, by the way, water always represented chaos. There's like this biblical metaphor between water representing chaos, water representing dangerous things. Like this is when the creation story kind of takes place in Genesis. The Spirit of God hovered over the waters of chaos. This idea of order coming into chaos, and how do we meet? They would say that water was the place, the unknowns, that we don't know what happens out there. It still kind of feels like that, right? I mean, imagine not having the mapping system and not having Google and standing on the edge of the Pacific Ocean and watching the chaos of the waves coming in. There's no way you'd be like, that feels safe and where I'm on firm ground. These are not the same. That feels way more dangerous. And so that's absolutely true for them. And for them, it always represented we need something different. So when Noah gets all of these animals in this story, this creation story of making sense of where we came from for them, an origin story, gathers them all in this ark, or this, really the word there is not ark, it's like this treasure chest or box, or rudderless box with no sail, no steering wheel, and no rudder, riding out the the waters of destruction, utterly dependent on providence alone, right? So humanity survives on this floating box in this chaotic river with nothing but God to provide. And in the same story then, right? This woman, this Levite woman has this child, sticks her child, her humanity in this box on the river to kind of let providence kind of take its way. It's very intertwined. It's very great in that way. Verse 4, the story continues with Moses. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies. Immediately, she knows just by looking at the skin tone of the kid or some sort of facial structure or whatever, she said, this is different than what we're used to. She said, then the sister asked the Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Now, I don't know how much of a writer you are or whatever, but it's easy to see where this story is headed. It's easy to see this is a really good story. This makes for a great plot line of a movie. I'm afraid for my child. I put him in the water. And then the sister comes and says, I know somebody who will take care of this child for you as a favor for you, right? It happens to be the child's mom, of course. And this is fantastic. This is great. Then the story continues. Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So not only is she getting to raise her own child in the midst of this chaotic circumstances, but she does it under the safety of Pharaoh's daughter. If anybody ever said anything, don't worry, this is fair. Pharaoh's daughter said this was okay. And I'm getting paid to do this. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. This is a story of a child who survives unique circumstances as a threat to authority, who comes with no expectations, comes from absolutely nothing. This is what we would call a reversal of expectations. We expect people to come from some certain pedigree to kind of make these decisions. This guy comes from absolutely nothing. In most stories, by the way, in most storylines, a protagonist is born into a ruling family, perhaps goes and lives amongst the commoners, and then realizes one day, hey, wait a second, I'm supposed to be a princess. How many stupid Disney movies have been this woman who goes like, hey, wait a second, did you know that your aunt is the queen of blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, I'm a princess, right? And we're like, oh, this is a great story for us. Somebody who comes from nothing and is something. This is now somebody who comes from absolutely nothing, is brought into this home, but realizes early on, by the way, does not belong here. Verse 11, one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were watching, and he watched them hard at their labor. At some point, and we don't know where the transition occurs, it says he went out and saw where his own people were. This is a child who, from a very young age, even though he was raised by his Hebrew mother for a certain period of time, at the point of kind of remembrance or at the point of maturity where he's then adopted into Pharaoh's family. He has all the rights and privileges that come with this, probably the education, the dress. As we're going to see later, he's going to look like an Egyptian. He's going to have a certain sort of mixed look, mixed feel. Like his identity is in crisis. He's not sure kind of exactly where he's from, and yet he recognizes, I do have my own people. I'm here. I'm in the privileged class, but there's a common association with somebody else, something outside of this. He watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people, again, twice in two occasions, his own people. Looking this way and that, and seeing nobody, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. He saw something taking place, and injustice was being done to this person who he identified with, and he did something about it. Now, let's set aside the ethical, question of was it right for him to murder as a result of that? That's not for this time or place. But what's going on here is an emergence in his mindset of who I belong to and who are my people and who are not my people. Then the story continues. The next day, verse 13, he went out and he saw two Hebrews fighting this time. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? The man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Now it's interesting because in this scenario, what he's asking is what gives you the right or the authority to determine one who is in the right and is in the wrong? Why are you doing this to this person? He's not doing it out of a sense of pity, or I don't think he's doing it out of a sense of I feel bad for the person being beaten or whatever. I think he's doing it out of there's something in me that cries out for justice, and I'm willing to step over common boundary lines of expectations in order to seek out justice. He's a person who is obsessed and concerned with justice. And he sees this and he says, why are you doing this to the one that is in the wrong? Who are you to be judge and jury over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptians? So then this story it's starting to open up a little bit, and he's realizing, I'm in trouble now. Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. He went to a place that's kind of out of bounds, out of nowhere. He went to the unknown. He went so far out of it, he doesn't belong in either group. I don't belong with the Hebrews. I don't belong with the Egyptians. I'm going to go to a place called Midian because I'm all out of places to go. And this is an important thing. As Jesus is being looked at from this New Testament church and trying to make sense of, what do we make sense of Jesus? And they liken him to Moses. For sure, he's got this reversal of expectations. Like we're not sure where he came from. He doesn't really belong to us. He doesn't really belong to anybody. We look at it and we say, what good can come from Nazareth? You keep talking about Jesus as this Messiah, but we know his dad, and isn't this Joseph's son who was a carpenter with him? For sure, this idea of he came from nothing is an important piece. We see this big idea that he's a threat to the establishment. For sure, Jesus was perceived as that. Similar to Moses, Jesus is like that. They're trying to make sense of this. And then this last way, this concern for justice. This concern for other people that both here and in the previous case involving the Egyptian taskmaster, Moses is moved not because he feels sorry for the Israelites. Both were a commitment to setting things right. I just want to do the right thing regardless of the personal cost for me. Regardless of the personal cost for me. Then, it says this, verse 16, now priests of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue, and he watered their flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, why have you returned so early today? They answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Here's what's going on. He goes and he's in this unknown land, and these women show up, and he begins to do these things to help them, even though they're complete and utter strangers. They look nothing like him. They're neither Hebrew nor Egyptian. They're this kind of different thing, and he still is concerned with this idea of justice. And the Hebrew words that are used here, this idea of he was a savior to us. He rescued us. They're laden with this sort of meaning. He's portrayed as somebody whose acts are thoroughly and intrinsically connected to deliverance. And he was willing to do this out of a conviction for justice, regardless of personal cost. Listen, as the early church is trying to make sense of Jesus, and they're saying he's like Moses, what does it mean that he's like Moses? He was utterly concerned with deliverance and justice and setting things right, regardless of personal cost. The decisions that he made, the things that he did, he's like that. He's like a new and better Moses is basically their way of looking at this. The story continues, verse 20, and where is he? This father asked his daughters, why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat with us. Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave him his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son. Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. I've got really no home to be able to belong to. People would name their children after this current state of being that I'm in, or where I feel like I'm at in terms of relationship with God. And in this moment, he says, I feel like I'm a foreigner in a foreign land. His actions here reveal him to be a man whose care and concern for others isn't limited even to his own people. He's a man whose regard for others extends even to those who are most distinctly other, strangers in his own world. He is perceived as just the kind of man that God needs to realize his original plan of creation, a story that extends to the whole world. So why in the world wouldn't the early church begin to draw comparisons between Jesus and what we have in Jesus and the type of person that Moses was? A threat to the establishment. Somebody who comes from absolutely nothing that you would expect him to be. And then this idea that he's ultimately concerned for justice. Now, that's where these things line up. This is where it kind of takes a little bit of a twist. And I mentioned that the picture on the box doesn't always match the picture in the puzzle. During that long period, verse 23, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning and he remembered his covenant with Abraham. And in week 1 of this series, I said remembering in this kind of context is different than us saying, on Mother's Day, hey, don't forget your mom on Mother's Day. When your dad says that to you, don't forget mom on Mother's Day, he's not saying don't forget that you have a mom that exists. He's trying to say don't forget to do something for your mom. There's an active thing in this, right? This is him saying, I actively remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. For the Jewish people, these few lines right here represent the critical turning point of the story, where God actively enters into the story for the first time, visibly, physically, to set in motion the chain of events that will eventually lead to these people's deliverance. Remember, God had this, in the story of Abraham, as Abraham kind of told it, there was a voice that called me outside and said, look at the stars, I'm going to make you into this mighty nation, make this covenant with you, and we're going to do this. But then there's really ultimately silence for a long period of time. God is, if he's at work, it's behind the scenes, and it's not overt, and it's not visible. And then they go into slavery for 400 years, and they have these stories of kind of where we come from, and these origin stories that show up, and there was an ark involved, and there was this and that, and a creation narrative, and all of these things that kind of match a little bit some of the creation narratives about some of the surrounding pagan religions, as they're trying to make sense of this thing, and they go, who are we really? Who are we really? We keep saying we're a Jewish people. What does that mean? What is this? What are we doing here? What's the point of all of this? And for 400 years, we've been slaves. Is this what it means to be a chosen nation? This is what we've been chosen for? Lucky for us. This is like getting a letter in the mail. Lucky for you, you're getting audited. You're like, that's not great. Can I not be chosen? I don't want to be selected. I don't want to be lucky in that way. You're one of, only 10,000 people that get audited every year. Well, that sucks. Thank you. How about I pass that along to somebody else? In this way, they're going, what does this even mean? This doesn't do anything for me. And in this way, then, this is where the story shifts for them. This is why this became such a master story for them. God began to show up. God showed up in Moses with these plagues. He showed up with this, anytime he met with the Pharaoh, right? And he would say, we're going to perform these, you let my people go. No, I'm not going to let your people go. I'm not going to let you go. We need you for work. We need you for free labor. Do it. The God who is greater than all of your other gods, combined or whatever, is telling you to do this. And who's this God? What are you talking about? And every single plague, every time he does this, it's representative of a God who has greater strength than the current God of the Pharaoh. So when locusts come in, it's you have this God of the locusts, right? And your God can't compete with this. And your God of the Nile River, well, I'm going to turn the whole Nile River red, right? The God of flies or whatever. It's always, you have your God, here's your God, here's what you say is powerful, and we're going to show you a plague, I'm going to show you a plague of a God who's more powerful than this. It was this constant power dynamic of who's greater. And at one point, it would be Moses writing the story of the Exodus, people going, listen, here's how weak your power is, Pharaoh. You think you're so strong and powerful. Your gods are weak. And by the way, your daughter doesn't even listen to the rules. Your daughter is down by the river raising a Hebrew child that you said shouldn't exist. And it shows up for you. This is an amazing power dynamic story at play. And in this way, finally, God shows up in a dynamic way, in a visible way, and the story begins to shift right here. The reason the Jewish people existed is that when it comes to this part of the story, they begin to relax. This is where we know God cares for us. This is where, if this was a movie, the soundtrack begins to change. This is where Neo figures out he can control bullets, right? This is important. And then the question becomes, well, why now? Why would he do it in this moment and not previously? I mean, after all, there have been other places in the narrative prior to this one where we might have expected him to intervene. Surely dead babies in the Nile would be a good place to start. Feels like you missed an opportunity there to kind of step in. But God comes into the story at this point to deliver his people because it is for them exactly at this point that they begin to groan in their slavery, cry out for help, and ask for deliverance in this way. And so for the Jewish people, they believed God responded in this not out of pity, Not because he saw somebody getting unjustly treated. Unjustly treatment in the ancient world, like that was wherever you looked. This was essentially them saying, God made a promise, and he came through on his promise to us. We are a people of the promise. God did this out of justice to set things right for a people that he said he would set things right. Why he made those promises is a topic for another time, another series. And why he acts now is not, again, simply because he feels sorry for them, nor because he takes pity on them, nor even solely because he necessarily likes or even loves them. He would say the motivation is, these are my people. These, I don't even like them, but these are the people that I chose, right? You get sort of that sense. It's his justice and not simply his charity, although perhaps charity is undoubtedly involved. I made a promise and I never go back on my promises. And when you've been on the raw end of injustice for that length of time, perhaps love takes the form of justice and setting things right, a righting of wrongs or setting free or a new beginning. This is where the story diverges a little bit. Yes, Jesus is very much like Moses. Yes, our situation is a lot like that. But when John sits down to write his version of how do we make sense of Jesus' life, he records for us, and I'm closing with this. This is our last passage together. A story of one of the Pharisees, one of the religious leaders, approaching Jesus at night. His name is Nicodemus. And he's probably afraid to go in the daytime because he's afraid of like public humiliation or doesn't want to be publicly identified with him. Later he will after his death, but in this part of the story, he's kind of like testing the waters. Like, you're interesting to me, you're intriguing. I have questions, but I don't want like other people to know I have questions. I have a lot to lose here. In the same way, for a lot of us, we've heard the story of Jesus, or you're watching this or whatever, or, you're not really, you don't personally identify as a Christian, but you're like, this isn't, Jesus, you sound like an interesting guy. I'm just not sure how much I want to sign on to this. I have a lot to lose. And you don't, but it's fine. It's this question of like, what do we do with this Jesus character? So Nicodemus is there and he's asking him a question under the shroud of darkness, and he comes to him at night and he asks him, or doesn't even ask him a question. That's the funny part. I think he just makes this statement: Rabbi, teacher, we know, not even identifying like his own personal thing. He's like trying to kind of cloud it in like this common, we think. We know that you are a teacher come from God. For no one can do these things or these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered him. Not that this was a question. He's just making a statement, right? And Jesus answered him, truly, truly, I tell you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. To which then Nicodemus goes into this like joking manner of, well, born again, like I got to go find my mom again? This is going to be a little awkward. You know what I mean? I don't know if I can sign up for anything like that. And then Jesus answers him in this new way of talking about what it means to be born again and this renewal of our minds and this renewal piece. And then the most like super incredibly powerful and very, very different from the story of Exodus, where God acted because he needed to, because he had to, because of contractual obligation. John records for us, no, God acted. He showed up after a long period of like, we're not sure if God is still with us. In the same way that the Hebrew people went into 400 years of slavery and go, is God really with us? The Jewish people went into exile, came back from exile, and now it's been periods of silence, and now Rome is oppressing them, and they're asking the same exact question. Was God really, was that just a bunch of stories from like the past that don't mean anything? Is that really about us? Is there a God that really cares about us in this way? And then this thing happens, this conversation with Nicodemus happens, and the interpretation that John records for us, for his audience who are reading this, who are trying to figure out and make sense of Jesus and what Easter means to them, says this about Jesus in this moment. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. You've seen this verse, it's a common verse. It's on football stadiums everywhere, right? But what was the motivation for doing this? His motivation was not out of an obligation from a covenantal relationship necessarily. What John said, the motivation that we saw is a God who loves. He didn't do it out of pity, but he did it out of love for us, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Remember, this is not Jesus saying this to Nicodemus. This is John's interpretation of this verse, or of this story. John is offering his kind of theology 40, 50, 60 years after this conversation with Nicodemus took place, going, what I saw was a man who cared about them and did this out of love, who was sent by a God who loved, who loved us to provide a way of, again, preservation from death, preservation from the powers of sin, and something different. For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. There is a lot of Moses in Jesus. There is a lot of similarities, is what they would say. You should definitely read through the Exodus story and have that inform what we see about Jesus. Absolutely, he was a threat to the establishment. Absolutely, he had this reversal of expectations with all of this. And absolutely, he was concerned for justice, even at the personal expense of himself. For people who looked nothing like him, who, as Paul would say, even hated him. He loved us before we could even love him. He operated not as a response to us, but out of his love for us. But one distinct thing to note is in this new version of it, God did not do this out of pity, out of sympathy, out of obligation to a contractual relationship. He operated out of love. And so for us, as we read this and as we go next week and we experience this Easter story and receive communion at home together or just remember the Easter story, we remember it ultimately not out of this is what naturally had to take place, this is what did. This is an expression of love. This is God showing us in the darkness, you never have to question anymore how I stand with you. The reason that Easter exists is because of the fact that he loved the entire world so much that he sent his son. To miss that at Easter, to miss the uniqueness of Jesus' coming in this way, to say, well, yeah, it just feels like we're a people group and we kind of deserve this and this is what happens. No. This is above and beyond that. Easter reminds us that there is a God who loved us so much that he sent his son to welcome us into a new reality, to introduce a new kingdom, a new way of doing life, to preserve us from the power of sin and death, and to offer us a new way forward in this way. Yes, a new and better Moses. And next week, we get to talk through that exodus, that movement away from that and what into this new world means. And I hope that you'll come back and watch and be a part of next week as we finish off Exodus, a look at understanding or making sense of Easter. Let's pray. Father, our prayer this week is that somehow, whether we're going to read stories, we're going to hear things, it's Easter, so it's like pretty common for us to kind of hear about this Jesus story or see this. I pray that as we see it this week, we would see it and look at it through the lens of thank you for being a God who loves so much that he sent. Thank you for being a God who loves so much that he sent, even for somebody like me. Give us the wisdom to know what that looks like in our life and how that resonates within us, and the courage to act on it. In your name, amen. Amen. All right. If you're watching this online, below the screen here is a little Connect card. If you would fill that out, let us know who you're watching with. That would be great. For those of you in the room today, you probably picked up one of these at the top of the ramp. Or if you have the app on your phone, we actually prefer if you would do it on there. Let us know that you're here. If you're a first-time guest, we donate money to a different organization doing good things locally and globally. And for the month of March, it's Grace Clinic over in Kennewick that provides medical services for the uninsured or underinsured in our area. So if you let us know that you're here, we know how much to donate. That would be great. Next weekend, Easter, we're going to do the same schedule. So a 9 o'clock service with adults only in the auditorium, or kids are welcome, but we don't have any kids areas open. 10 o'clock in person with kids, and then obviously online as well. We are anticipating large crowds for Easter, and so as we do every year, make sure to let us know that you're coming. We do have, unfortunately, we have room limitations every year because, the fire department, but they're even more so this year just because of COVID stuff. And so if you could help us out and RSVP and let us know you're coming, that helps us kind of logistically plan for it, both with leaders and kind of seating areas and everything else. So that would be great. And then the last thing is our next round of Base Camp. Base Camp is on the back of the program, and the very last thing, it's a 4 or 5 week kind of training course on helping you discover what it might look like for you to wear love in your area, your community, your circle of influence. And we've been doing them online for the time being and via Zoom. And the next one is starting April 14th. It's on Wednesday nights. And if you're interested in signing up for that, make sure to mark the Connect card. And Lauren will be in touch with more information about that. All right. I'm going to read a closing benediction for you. Get you on your way. We give thanks, God, for the prophets who love us enough to tell us your hard truth. Show us where we need your words for our repentance and conversion, and teach us how to always speak your truth in love. Amen. May that go with you this week, whatever you're facing. See you next week for the conclusion and Easter Sunday. See ya.